now know who they're playing. Dodgers, Blue Jays, Game 1 Friday night in Toronto. Blue Jays have home field advantage, but the Dodgers the heavy favorites.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a guy from the deep South, Pablo. I never was a
Just
huge fan of the Blue
humble
Jays.
Country lawyer.
Humble country lawyer. Never a huge fan of the Blue Jays. Of course, I love the Expos, but you have to love a Expo, the Montreal Expos, if you're American.
Yeah.
You just absolutely have to. But last night we had a game that franchises that, you've got a Canadian franchise against Seattle, a vaguely Canadian franchise.
Canada curious.
But I will tell you, there's something.
Yeah.
There's, Canadian adjacent. But this is a very long wind-up to say. I can't believe it, but there's something really special about this Blue Jays team, and they excite me. They're gutsy. I mean, you look at Vlad; he's doing an incredible job. I have found myself and it's not just that they beat the Yankees. I mean, really humiliated the Yankees, just stomped the ever-living life out of the New York Yankees. It's not just that. This is a really gutsy team, and a team that I think, a lot of Americans like. This is like people, USA. Yes. I mean, of course, North Americans, they're North Americans. We love our Canadian friends. A lot of people from Canada watch the show, and we absolutely love you, and we appreciate you loving us. But I'm telling you, this Blue Jays team is special.
Oh, look, there is now. By the way, I should acknowledge there is now a perspective that both of us share. Yankee fan, unrepentant Red Sox apologist. We are both cartoon pancakes flattened by this team. We're both looking up at Canada and Toronto geographically, metaphorically. This Blue Jays team, by the way, gets to go from the Goliath versus the underdog Mariners, John, to the underdog now against the heavy favorite Dodgers, who should be the heavy favorite.
Rightly so. Dodgers peaking at the right time. We have John Heilman as a Dodger fan. We'll get his thoughts in a second.
Do we need that?
I mean, we should get fair play. We have fair play. But Joe, certainly the Dodgers come into this. They're going to have a week off, which doesn't always help in baseball. Sometimes that leads to rust. But their starting rotation of Snell, Yamamoto, Glasnow, and Shohei Ohtani. That's pretty hard to beat.
Yeah. I mean, seriously, John, I don't know how you can be excited going into this World Series. It really is like cheering for Microsoft. I guess if you love cheering for monopolies, if you love the little guy getting stomped into the ground, maybe you take some really weird delight in cheering for the Dodgers. But there's just no sport to it anymore. So how do you even get excited about this series?
Well, Joe, I take great delight in Canadians getting stomped into the ground, and pretty much everyone else. Listen, I'll say that I was rooting for Seattle.
We love our Canadian friends. We love our Canadian friends. What are you doing? We're always having to clean up after you. We love our Canadian friends. They're our brothers.
Arnold hates Seattle. John hates Toronto.
I love my
What's that about?
I love my Canadian friends too. But I'm just saying, you asked me how I could root for the Dodgers. I told you the truth. Look, I was rooting for Seattle, not for the reasons that Pablo was rooting for Seattle, or I guess Lemire was rooting for Seattle. The Dodgers were 6-0 against the Mariners during the regular season, and they would have had home field advantage. So I was rooting hard for the Mariners. But listen, Joe, here's the answer to how you root for the Dodgers. Shohei Ohtani. I was present at the game on Friday night, Thursday night, whatever night that was, Game 4. Yeah. And, I'm saying that only to say it was a miraculous thing to witness. I'm jealous of that. I have heard my friend Pablo Torre say this. We are all lucky to live on planet Earth at the same time as Shohei Ohtani, because we're seeing someone play the game better than anybody else has ever played it. So I'm psyched about that. Can't you get behind that, Joe?
Okay, fine. for the Bill Gates of baseball. I mean, it's a monopoly out in L.A., so I guess you're excited that, you know, he's crushed all competition and you know, has created a monolith. But I'm sorry, Jonathan Lemire, I can't get excited about this Dodgers team, and I am serious about what I'm about to say here. Ignore everything I've said for the past 20 years, but I am serious about this one thing I'm about to say. If the Dodgers win again, and if they win 2 World Series in a row, with this sort of payroll and scamming the system the way they do by, like, not counting Ohtani's, I'm serious, not counting Ohtani's $700 million salary, if they continue that scam, they're ruining baseball, and I fear we will have a strike. And at some point, the union, I will say this, the union will have to be broken because there's going to have to be salary caps if the Dodgers win this year, because there's no competition. If you're Cincinnati, if you're Milwaukee, I mean, if you're, you know, Tampa, how do you compete with Los Angeles? You can't, because it is literally a monopoly. They write massive checks. There's no competition left in the game.
Well, to your point, once this World Series ends, unfortunately, we are on labor stoppage watch. There's only 1 year left in the CBA. They'll play next year. That'll happen. But the year after, there's some real concerns. There'll be a strike or a lockout, and that's a big part of it. It's about, yes, the teams like the Dodgers or the Mets spending the way they do, and the Yankees spending the way they do, but it's also about other franchises.
Not the Red Sox, though. Not the Red Sox.
In recent years, not the Red Sox.
We are the little engine that could.
Oh, my.
But it's about franchises that
I think I can.
It's really about, though, it's also about franchises who don't spend, owners who can afford it, Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, the like, who haven't been. So, yeah, there's some real but I will just say this. Baseball is on such a roll right now. The pitch clock has made such a difference. Big stars, attendance way up, TV ratings up. The game has arguably never been healthier or more popular. They've really endangered if they lose any other times. Dave Roberts, though, we should note, doesn't seem to mind. After the sweep on Friday, he hears the criticism about how Dodgers are damaging the game, and he even said in his post-game interview, well, let's get 4 more wins, and then we'll really ruin baseball. But that is an off-season storyline. We have the World Series to look forward to starting Friday night. I suppose now, channeling my Mika at 9:09, let's get to our second top story, because the World Series is number 1. And we are now 3 weeks into the government shutdown. Still no end in sight. But what we are beginning to see are its real-world effects. The FAA says staffing shortages from the shutdowns caused thousands of flight delays across the U.S. over this past weekend. According to the website FlightAware, at least 8,000 flights were delayed from Friday to Monday at major airports. They include Dallas, Newark, Chicago, and Atlanta. About 13,000 air traffic controllers and 50,000 TSA officers are currently working without pay. And there's some new polling out this very morning about the shutdown. The latest Reuters Ipsos poll finds that half of Americans blame Republicans in Congress for the shutdown. That's compared to 43% who blame Democrats, 50 to 43. When asked who is feeling the financial effects of the shutdown, 21% said they themselves have been hurt by it, while 39% said it has hurt people that they know. And a majority, including almost all Democrats and half of Republicans, said the expiring health insurance subsidies should be extended. So, Joe, look, shutdowns aren't good for anyone, but what has been consistent these last couple weeks, Republicans taking more of the blame in voters' eyes, and it does seem like there was some talk in the first day or two of the shutdown. Could Democrats hang together? Well, they have, and it seems like they picked the right issue to rally around, health care, really resonating per that poll.
Well, I mean, it's incredible they did that. I mean, Molly, of course, there's long been a parlor game played in the most exclusive places in Georgetown and also in the Upper East Side, where people would play this game and just live in this make-believe world that Democrats actually figured out how to be on the right side of an issue and actually be able to explain it to the American people in a way that they would be on their side. Boom. We dream no more. 72% of Americans Come on, hard to believe. 72% of Americans are on Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries' side. They're actually winning this debate. What's the impact on the shutdown?
And you know, it's funny because I was a shutdown skeptic. I thought, oh, Trump has this huge microphone. Democrats have had real trouble messaging. They're not going to be able to do it. And remember, Schumer caved the first time in March when they tried to shut down. So I thought for sure this is not going to work. And I have been shocked at how they have been able to message in a really consistent way. They have been able to stay focused. And, you know, I talked to someone in leadership yesterday who was saying to me, you couldn't make this case about pocket rescissions. You couldn't make this case about how Donald Trump was taking the power of the purse away from Congress, which he is also doing with this, with the funding stuff and, you know, not spending the money that's been allocated. But this is very clear. It's happening. And, you know, November 1st, these premiums go up in Nevada.
Yeah, I mean, and John Heilman, it's one of these things where, you know, politicians in Washington can talk all they want to, but as Ross Perot would say, when the rubber meets the road and people see that their health care premiums keep skyrocketing, they see that the denials keep going up, when they see that the affordability crisis hits them where it is the most personal, when they start getting notices from the rural hospitals that, you know, wings of hospitals are going to shut down, or their pediatric care is going to be challenged or threatened, or that nursing homes that are funded by Medicaid, that doctors are, you know, it has a real world impact. And suddenly, you don't need a gaggle of 15 Democrats behind a microphone and a podium with the Capitol behind them. This is happening to people in Middle America. This is happening to people in Marjorie Taylor Greene's district. It's happening to people in Hakeem Jeffries' district. It's happening across the board. And Republicans can have very logical arguments about clean CRs. They can have very logical arguments about whatever they want to have clean, about regular order, which I support. Regular order. It just doesn't matter to most Americans. Most Americans feel the pinch of these healthcare costs skyrocketing, and they're blaming Republicans.
Right. And I think, Joe, it's interesting because when you look at all the data around shutdowns and polling in the past, and in this case, this turns out to be consistent, you know, you always have a fight, a messaging fight between the two parties trying to blame each other, right? And the question is always like, who's perceived to be winning or losing? The answer to that turns out to not have almost anything to do with the messaging about blame, because most voters just assume these are hypocritical, deceptive politicians who are engaged in the blame game. The way in which they decide is on the basis of what it seeks in at some point. The real messaging battle that seeps in is, what is this shutdown about? What are we fighting over? And it turns out that there are some issues that if you're fighting over them, they will blame Democrats, and some they will blame Republicans. And if the issue is health care, if health care is at the center, that's an issue the Democrats are going to win on. And so the great success here the Democrats have had has not been about blaming Republicans effectively, but about making the fight, as Lemire said before, it's so essential. They made this fight about an issue that they were almost guaranteed to win on. And then you get to your point about affordability. I got to say, the health care thing is out of control, but it's doubly out of control when you put it next to the broader inflation concerns, the tariff issues, the fact that people call this, the Biden administration, we call it inflation. Now we call it affordability, but it's the same thing, which is that people were already feeling the pinch in a million ways that they didn't think they were going to be feeling the pinch because Trump said they wouldn't be doing that anymore. Prices are still high across the board. And then you throw a health care kicker on top of that. That is a recipe for a resonant political issue.
Yeah, and, you know, we have a story on the front page of the New York Times. It's something Andrew can talk about in a second, John, Lemire. But we do really have a two-tiered economy. There are, to quote John Edwards from 2004, there are two Americas. We have seen one statistic after another over the past 2 years that our GDP that is rising because the richest of the rich are spending a lot of money. Well, we're starting to see working Americans and middle-class Americans getting crushed by the affordability crisis. A story yesterday talking about how you have working Americans that are not able to make payments on cars that they've gotten on car loans. And the crunch is really starting to come. Front page of the New York Times, splurge by rich as many strain just to get by. It's on the front page of the New York Times here. And that is the real challenge, yes. The richest of the richest of the rich who are getting these Republican tax cuts, they're doing great. They're spending a lot of money. Things are better for them now than ever if they're heavily invested in the stock market, if they have been for the past couple of years. They're making more money than ever before. It is working Americans who are getting crushed. It is middle-class Americans who are getting crushed, and they're the very people who need help on the affordability crisis, whether you're talking about at the grocery store, at the gas pumps, or when it comes to their health care. And that's what this debate is going to center around. That's what the races in New Jersey and Virginia and New York City are going to center around this fall and next fall. It's what the midterm elections are going to center around. And right now, we're an economy where the rich are getting richer, and it's getting tougher for working Americans and middle-class Americans. And the explosion of AI and the fact that more and more young Americans getting out of college aren't going to be getting jobs the way they used to because of AI, only making that divide bigger.
Yeah, and that's tying this all together. You just read from the headline on the front page of the printed New York Times, the lead headline on their app right now: government shutdown with no clear end poses new economic threat. So for more on all this, let's bring in the co-anchor of CNBC Squawk Box and a New York Times columnist, Andrew Ross Sorkin. Andrew, good to see you this morning. Let's start with the story that Joe talked about there. This idea of the real divide in America growing, the rich just getting only richer, phenomenally so, while so many other Americans left behind, really struggling.
Look, you're seeing it the way car loans are even set up right now, just the people who are defaulting on that. There's so many signals in the market about this sort of widening divide in the economy, the widening divide that's being driven in large part, as we've discussed on this broadcast, by the AI boom, which is benefiting some, but not all. And then there's the rest of the economy. Jason Furman, the economist at Harvard, has a fascinating study that he's just looked at, where effectively he says if you take the AI boom effectively that's taking place in our economy out of GDP, we effectively have a flat GDP, meaning we have almost no growth in this economy at all. And it's a surprising thing to consider, given that you look at where the stock market is today. Clearly, those who are wealthy, those who have assets already, are benefiting from all of that. If you do not have that, if you do not have a home, and by the way, there are places where even some homes are not appreciating that well, you are looking at a much different situation. And I think it's very indicative of just the risks in our economy more broadly, given the concentration, not just of wealth, but of where the wealth is coming from.
Well, and you can see that even in the stock markets. I mean, you look at how much money people have made in the stock market over the past couple of years, the richest of the rich. It comes from the Mag 7. It comes from 7 stocks that have lifted up the indexes, all of them.
Well, and that's the risk that I think is the thing that's not being considered, which is to say, if that kind of concentration is powering everything, to the degree that falters at all, what happens everywhere else? And I think that's the hard part. You know, it's so we're in this very unique moment. If you were to read the headlines, if you were to watch the broadcast, your broadcast, as we talk about the politics of our country, the geopolitics, everything else, you'd say to yourself, it feels like we're in a very fragile world. And yet, if you look at the stock ticker, you would think that there's no risk and that everything's going up. And invariably, it has to be somewhere in the middle between those two.
Yeah, it does seem like the stock market doesn't necessarily reflect reality on the ground, but it continues to soar. Andrew, let's hit another couple of topics real quick. One would be yesterday, the president signed a rare earth minerals deal with Australia, clearly meant to sort of compete with China.
That's right. I mean, I think that that deal is more of a chess piece, a hopeful leverage point in the larger conversation with China, which is to say, hey, China, hey, President Xi, we may not need you for some of this, and therefore, the things we're asking for, you may have to give us. I don't know. We'll see how big a deal this ultimately turns out to be, and we'll see where China really stands on this. I think one of the things that's happened over this last couple of months, and we've seen it a couple of times, is that every time we've asked for more from China, the market's actually oddly reacted. I don't want to say it's odd, has reacted negatively, and therefore the president, to some degree, has softened his tone. And so it's going to be interesting to see, how this moves forward and how much leverage we really do have with them.
And lastly, and briefly, Andrew, Amazon Web Services crashed yesterday. A lot of websites, popular apps, not usable for long stretches of time. What's the sense here as to the cause, if it's known, and the economic fallout?
Look, I don't think we know the cause, except that there was this database that, you effectively had all of these websites referring to this database, and the database wasn't hitting on all cylinders, if you will. That has been fixed. Look, there's a real fallout. There's an economic cost. If you were trying to go to a website, you couldn't. Airlines were struggling with baggage. I mean, there was all sorts of things. I don't think we'll get a full tally. I think the larger issue is, and this only happened, as you know, for a couple of hours, thank goodness. The larger issue is if this were to take place, for a day or a week, we'd have a much bigger problem. So I think there's a big question about resiliency and just how important these cloud providers have become. They are almost like utilities, and then there's a question of whether they are too big to fail.
Yeah, and points of security, perhaps. CNBC's Andrew Sorkin with a plug for his previous book just now, his new book, 1929, Inside the Greatest Crash in Wall Street History and How It Shattered a Nation, is on sale now. I started it last night before the baseball game. Coming up next on Morning Joe, a federal appeals court will allow the Trump administration to send National Guard troops into Oregon against the state's wishes. We'll dig into those details straight ahead. Plus, he has sold over 75 million albums over the course of a career that also includes 5 Grammy Awards. Michael Bublé joins the table straight ahead to discuss the latest season of
Voice. The French Justice Minister admits this has exposed security failings at the museum. Pretty obvious statement there. With us now is Scott Selby, a lawyer and heist expert. Thanks so much for being with us. Just your first reaction when you learned the details of what happened here.
I mean, it's shocking. The level of security is definitely not up to par, considering this is the most popular museum in the world. They have so many people coming through there. And this is literally the crown jewels, the French crown jewels that were taken.
It's been 2 days now since this 7-minute action. How far do you think these robbers are, and how difficult will it be to catch them?
It's tough. And honestly, I'm not that worried about catching them. It's really catching what they have, getting these crown jewels as quickly as possible, right? Because I'm confident they'll get the thieves, but maybe it takes a couple years, right? The thing is we have to find them and get these jewels before they're broken down into their component parts and recut.
I mean, how quickly do you think they would move to do that, given that they clearly planned out this operation? How often do people like this plan the steps immediately after?
If they're professionals, then they definitely have it all planned out, or at least they have a fence they could give it to who then moves this on. And these things happen very quickly, right? These are very hot commodities. So you have to move fast. I mean, French authorities have put out the figure of a week. It's all speculation, but you really do have to move quite quickly to get these because, well, they're priceless right now. Even for billions of dollars, you can buy these legally. These thieves could turn them into their parts and just sell them off. And that's a whole process. As soon as you break it all apart and start cutting these things up, you've lost the historical value.
What's your gut tell you about the likelihood that they're still intact?
Right now, it's been 2 days. I think they're still intact.
When you see something like this happen and you see them move up with that, that retractable ladder to get up a story to break in there, they knew exactly where to go. Do you have questions about whether there might have been someone on the inside helping them?
I mean, that's a question every time, but in this case, given that it's a museum open to the public, I think that they simply scouted it and spotted an opportunity. There's some construction work going on at the time, and so it kind of made sense. And they moved so fast, and it was so brazen to do this during daylight when there's so many tourists there that for the 7 minutes it took, nobody thought anything about it. I mean, of course, once they start breaking into stuff, but just showing up and, you know, having those yellow vests.
And any mistakes you think that might help lead to them getting caught?
Oh, yeah, they made some mistakes because they had to move fast. And while security didn't stop them, they definitely, you know, came on the scene. They brought that kind of ladder vehicle, almost like a cherry picker, with them, and they intended to burn it, is my understanding, but security stopped them. Also, a vest was left behind. So we'll see, but there probably are little mistakes that they made. And these days, given how high a priority it is and how much forensic technology is advanced, I think there's going to be clues.
As you say, there are two races going on right now, the race to catch them, but also the race to recover the jewels, and they may be on separate tracks at some point. Scott Selby, great to see you this morning. Thank you very much. Text messages sent by the U.S. Attorney going after James Comey and Letitia James. How these messages might put the cases in jeopardy. And a popular online platform for children now being called a, quote, breeding ground for predators.
Sick of Christmas?
2 days ago, I was with the kids.
Yeah.
They got them up for school.
Yeah.
And I said, 68, 68. And my oldest son, Noah, said, what is 68? And I went, 68 days till Santa Claus. So
you're not sick of Christmas?
Not only am I not sick of it, it is the greatest, listen, I'll be long gone. Listen, I know, I'll be gone, people will, but that legacy will be forever, and it's a time when, listen, I got good, strong faith. I love a time when people are a little kinder, and in this cynical world, I will so take being a good, positive part of those feelings. So I love it. Every second.
Michael Joe's got the...
Hey, Joe.
Yeah, I mean, hey there. It's so very cool, though. You have such an extraordinary career. All of your songs will, like that, Nat King Cole. You know, it still was special. My dad, you know, every Christmas would hear Nat King Cole. I'm still playing to my kids. So you're right. That will live on. But you have such an extraordinary body of work and such an extraordinary career that will even live on far past that. I am curious, though. I'm always fascinated by what really connects with Middle America. We're so splintered. And I always loved how Johnny Carson always said, the key is the Central Time Zone. You take a song like The Voice, they love it. No, but I mean, it was genius, right?
Yeah.
But the key is, and of course we're talking especially in Canada, but the key is, yeah, of course, people on the coast love The Voice, but The Voice really connects with Middle America, too. And I'm just curious, you're such an extraordinary part of it, but what makes this show so special, and why has it had such a lasting impact on Americans?
Well, firstly, thank you for the compliment. I mean, I would say that I've become family with those people. And I realized quickly, talking to Carson Daly, who's the executive
show in Gaza, where repeated Israeli attacks have killed nearly 100 Palestinians and wounded over 200 since a Trump-backed ceasefire deal went into effect over a week ago. On Friday, Israeli military forces opened fire at a civilian bus, killing 11 members of a Palestinian family attempting to return home into Gaza City. Among the Abu Shaban family victims were 7 children between the ages of 5 and 13, an attack many have decried as the deadliest truce violation yet. Israel also bombed the headquarters of the Palestine Media Production Company in central Gaza, killing the broadcast engineer Ahmed Abu Matar. Israel accused Hamas of killing 2 Israeli soldiers in Rafah, but Hamas says there are reports the soldiers died when their bulldozer ran over unexploded ordnance and that they're not active in Rafah. Gaza officials report Israel's breached the fragile U.S. brokered agreement some 80 times. Despite the wave of Israeli strikes this weekend, President Trump said the ceasefire is still in place. Israel's also continued to hinder the flow of humanitarian aid into Gaza, again suspending the entrance of aid over the weekend. But Israeli officials are now saying aid distribution in Gaza and the ceasefire have resumed. This all comes as more Palestinians recently released from Israeli prisons have described torture while in Israeli jails. In a minute, we'll be joined by Al Jazeera reporter Ibrahim al-Khalili, who reunited with his brother Mohammed last week after Mohammed was released following 19 months in Israeli prison. This is his report on Al Jazeera, his brother held without charge.
He's my brother. He's back after 1 year and 7 months in detention, in Israeli detention after torture. We got detained with each other, but now I got released, and now after 1 year and 7 months, he's back again home.
Mohammed, how was the situation in prison after they detained you?
It was a big struggle. We were beaten and humiliated in wrong ways. We suffered a lot.
My brother is so tired. He needs to be back home again. But I can now say the war has really came to an end.
Last month, Al Jazeera reporter Ibrahim al-Khalili was on air when he broke the news of Israeli forces killing his own family members in Gaza.
I'm here today reporting from Gaza's Al-Daraj neighborhood east of Gaza City, where deadly Israeli airstrike flattened this complete residential block behind me. Many Palestinians have been confirmed killed, and at least 50 Palestinians are still trapped under the rubble. Tragically, many of my close relatives were among those killed in this airstrike. It came without any prior warning at midnight while people slept. This block used to shelter at least 100 Palestinians, and they sought refuge here, believing that this residential neighborhood is safe, but they ended up being targeted and brutally killed. This area once meant to be a